Hi, and welcome back to BeanTalk. Last week we already talked to Ben Carlson about his work with Long Miles Coffee that he does in Burundi, Kenya, and Uganda. And we learned a bunch about coffee farming in these African countries. And so today we want to continue this conversation with Ben. So yeah, Ben.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Is
sure,
that
of
allowed?
course. Yeah,
So
sure, go ahead.
my question is, in Austria,
Yeah.
what process of coffee seems to be the most desired?
Desired? It really depends. I've worked in coffee shops for the last 5 years and I couldn't really say. I mean, there's always going to be those kind of people that just start with drinking filter coffee and want something super fruity, like want an Ethiopian natural or coffee from Kenya. And I mean, there's always people looking for African coffees that are just super fruity and have a nice sparkling acidity to it. I guess there's still many people. I mean, that's just a specialty coffee scene, you know? There's like still this old coffee house kind of scene, as we call it, or coffee house kind of culture, as we call it here in Austria. And I guess people are not quite prepared for this fruity kind of coffee. But I couldn't really say whether people tend more towards washed or natural coffee. It just really depends. Even for me.
What I've found is it's really interesting for me to see different parts of the world when I've visited different roasters. There's specialty roasters, but some will roast darker, some will roast lighter, and it's all about, and I love that because it's about finding for the consumer in your community, in your area, what do they like? And if they're used to a dark roast and you're trying to introduce something grass-like and you know, like just fruity, they're like, what are you serving me?
I'm actually thinking about one time when I got in touch with Long Miles Coffee. It was in South Africa, in Bilito, in the Durban area, at a place called Science of Coffee. Do you know it? Maybe do you know Alessandro? He also gave an interview with us a few months back where he talked about coffee and the sustainability. Anyways, there he had this kind of small kind of batch roasters where you could come in and try to roast your own coffee. And that was actually the first time for me to ever roast coffee myself.
No, but that's wonderful. The interesting thing, we started, one of the reasons we started Long Miles and producing coffee was we had a vision of we had been in South Africa for 10 years. We lived there before we moved to Burundi. And we just recognized how hard it is for a small roaster to have a direct trade relationship with a coffee producer. And so was kind of the birth of Long Miles was, can we connect to small roasters? Can, like, somebody who just wants 5 bags of coffee, like that's stretching them, you know, like, can we, and so that we were like very on fire, like, let's make sure that we are accessible and can help, because we feel like those are the roasters who are the most passionate to share the story of the coffee. And we're like, there's a story to be told. And for Long Miles, and it's something that my co-founder, my wife, is the most passionate about. It's like, there's a story here. Yes, it's coffee, but it's a story. So like every micro lot has a story to tell. And so you can lose that when you're just selling grocery store bags of coffee. You know, you only have so much space in the bag, and but there's meaning behind it. And there's another one of the kind of the values of Long Miles is an African word called Ubuntu. And it's this idea where I can only be me when you are truly you. And it's like that togetherness aspect.
That's amazing. That's also what I love about the specialty coffee scene as a whole. When you can just go into a coffee shop and you have a good barista that can tell you the whole story behind the coffee, and he tells it with passion, and his whole work is with passion. And it's amazing also as an experience.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it makes me want to ask because of where you're at. I would love to know what's if you had like your top two coffee shop experiences, what would they be? I'm just always interested in that.
Wow, difficult. I couldn't really say, but I always love. For me, it's always. I mean, of course, you can get like a super nice fancy geisha, and it's probably gonna taste um, quite exciting and super floral, maybe fruity. But for me, I always like the coffees that kind of surprise you, that catch you off guard. I mean, there's a couple of coffees where you just have kind of this expectation, and you've tried coffees from this place over and over again, and you're getting a coffee and you think you know what it's gonna taste like, when it actually tastes completely different or catches you off guard. So also one coffee that was like that was at a place called Balthasar, where I used to work at, actually from a coffee from Eric.
I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got this coffee from Eric, which was the first Umusasi lot that he made, which was the competition coffee from a colleague of mine. And so without saying much, he just handed me like the cup and was like, yeah, we got this coffee from Rwanda. And I took the first sip and tasted it, it was like, wow. There was just something special about this coffee. It was just this crazy berry kind of experience.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. I've been friends with and helping out, just connecting with Eric since he started, and it's, I just love that his coffee is shining. I think that's so cool.
I mean, of course, all the coffee from Long Miles. I had them from a few different roasters. Let me think. I think the first one I had was from Hadi from Wild Café. Then I had it from Pernopi from Sweden, which was also amazing. I think it was many years ago, but I think it was Ninga Hill, and it was also an amazing coffee.
Those Ninga Hills were so good that we actually built our third washing station on Ninga Hill, just because of Ninga being such a amazing cup profile.
Yeah, that was at a different coffee shop that I used to work at Café Mick in Vienna, and there we would regularly do like this public kind of cuppings where people could come, and we had like samples from different roasters, and we could just try the coffees and cup them. And so we would cup all of these different samples, and Ninga Hill, there was just one of these coffees that just stood out like completely. And everyone was like, "Wow, that's crazy."
I just got a message from another roaster. Casino Mocha is about to release one of our lots, I think next week. So you can keep an eye out for them.
Yeah. So we already kind of talked a little bit about it. And I mean, we talked about coffee pricing and all the work that goes into producing coffee, and that farmers aren't really fairly compensated for the work they do and their coffee. So, I mean, of course, we talk about Wall Street prices. I mean, that's just crazy. But even talk about specialty coffee. What do you think about prices there?
I think that we still are underpaying for coffee. If you look at across the board what farmers are being paid for, they're being paid the same or maybe even less than they were 20, 30 years ago. And if you had a job in anywhere, in a bank or in an industry, other industry, and you're being offered a salary the same as like 20, 30 years ago, you just couldn't live on it. So I think that it has to correct. And I think that the New York shifting the way it has slightly now is not going to stay though. It's only shifted because Brazil had a down year, and specialty coffee and coffee consumption is on the rise. I think next year will be a Brazil up year, and the price will drop again. So I think that there's a fundamental problem with the farmer price that is going to farmers, and it's a hard price. It's a hard thing to solve, because as roasters and cafes are working with consumers, the prices are going up, but a lot of that is just to cover the cost of the roaster and the cafe, because it's costing more and more to run a cafe in Austria or Berlin or London. It just costs more and more and more, so the price goes up, but that often doesn't filter down to the farmer, because lots of roasters are literally just trying to keep their doors open. So I think that we're in an interesting spot right now, and I think I'm really glad to be in the conversation with roasters to understand, being able to share, this is the price for a living fair wage to farmers. I think there's going to have to be a continual conversation between roasters and producers, and I think that can only happen when there's relationship in coffee. Because if there's not a relationship, a coffee shop or a roaster doesn't really understand what's happening, and to be fair for them, it's not really become their problem, because the importer really deals with that. And so for long miles, it's one of the reasons why we work with the importers that we work with, because they care, and they're helping us to translate to the roaster and bridge that gap. And then we work directly and have that open line of communication. And it's interesting, because I've had, right when we started Long Miles, I had a couple of roasters come to me and say, why are you charging that? Break down your cost of production. Show me why I should pay that. And I was just like, wow, this is what coffee farmers around the world are being demanded by this kind of entitled Western roaster. Where if you're a roaster, I don't know any coffee producer in the world who comes to you as a producer or as a roaster and say, show me the breakdown of your cost of production, your rent, what you pay your employees, and your gross margin. Like, it's almost offensive. I think, like, in the United States, that would be almost offensive to ask. But somehow the power dynamic is in such a way that as a roaster, you're allowed to ask that to a farmer. As a farmer, you don't want to withhold that, because you just want to sell the coffee. So I think that relational dynamic is important for the longevity of specialty coffee, and
that should definitely change to make the prices more sustainable for the farmers as well, of course. I mean, what do you think can we as consumers do? In this case, of course, consumers being customers as well as roasters buying green coffee.
I think for me, the first step is at a consumer level is it's as simple as picking up a bag of coffee and seeing, does it say Guatemala? Because if it just says Guatemala, there's no way that roaster knows the farmer and is knows that they've paid a fair price. They might have, but there's really no accountability there. So when you can look at a package of coffee, so this is a challenge then to roasters. It's, can you put the story of the producer on the bag, so that it's almost like the authenticity of relationship. It's like, we know the producer, and if you know the producer and you name it and you showcase it, then that's the start of traceability, transparency, and the chances are that you're making the impact that you want to as a consumer and then as a roaster.
Definitely. And I also think, I mean, the way you do it kind of sounds like the ideal case for me with the direct trade. I mean, if you leave more middlemen out of it, that's just going to result in the farmers getting a better price. And I mean, it's also good for the roasters if they know the farmers themselves. I mean, they also get a better quality or know what kind of quality they're gonna get.
And I think the other thing, like, there we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the other thing for roasters is, I think a lot of specialty roasters there's like a $2.50 to $2.70 green price that roasters like to buy at. And I think that specialty roasters have to stop doing that. They have to understand that it's going to cost more to have a sustainable specialty coffee. And that's what happened this year now with the New York rising to where it has. You can't buy that coffee.
All right, I think that should pretty much cover it. And now, one of the most important questions, of course, where can one get Long Miles coffee? Like, from which roaster? So how do you know?
That's always the question we get. I mean, the sad thing is, the last 3 years in Burundi, there's been a bit of a drought, and so there's been very little coffee. We're seeing this year's been great rains, and remember, coffee's agricultural, so we wait for rain, we wait for sun. So this year we hope we're seeing a big better harvest than the last 3 years, which is awesome. But I think the best way to find is to go to longmilescoffee.com. On the website, there's a roaster selection tab. You can look there, and then as the season rolls out, as coffee starts to, like right now, the Burundi coffees are just hitting the shelves now. On Instagram, Long Miles Coffee Instagram account will often showcase whenever a roaster is having it. We're like, look at that, and we get excited. It's just like, it's one of my favorite things ever. Like 2014, I went to the SCA event and it was in what year? Where was it? Seattle. And I went up the escalator, and there was a big Stumptown cafe. And I went to the Stumptown cafe, and they had a big sign there saying their filter coffee was Long Miles Burundi. And that was our first year of harvest. And it's just like, every time I see Long Miles, I still can't believe that these roasters have our coffee. And so
awesome.
Any roaster that has it, I get excited. So if there's roasters that get our coffee, then we try to promote them on Instagram as one of the best ways. So check out Long Miles Coffee on Instagram, and it keeps you up to date on what's happening. And the stories is where we're, like, right this week, I've been sharing stories about, clearing the banana trees off of our land in Uganda so that we can put drying tables, and going to the dry mill and cupping our first real harvest of Kenya. And so check out the stories on Long Miles Coffee on Instagram, and I think you'll start to find where to get coffee.
Awesome. We'll definitely have to check out Casino Mocha next week in this case.
Yep, that's the one. Be online. It'll sell out.
All right, that should pretty much wrap it up. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, the only thing I would say is that I am excited to get back to Austria and to Germany again. It's been a long time since I've been there. I think it's been like 3-4 years, and I think I'm overdue. And I think the next time I come, I'm going to be sharing about our reforestation project, because this year we've started kind of our big goal is to plant 10 million indigenous shade trees in East Africa.
Wow.
And
it's amazing.
I want roasters to understand that by planting shade trees, it's going to not only save the planet, it's going to create better coffee, but it also means that you're not producing as much coffee. So, like, just telling that story. And so I feel like in the coming months, Long Miles is going to be more and more discussing this idea of environmental impact through shade coffee, because it means we're putting, trees in the ground.
And definitely when you're back in Austria, you should hit us up, and maybe we can go for a cup of coffee. I mean, there's many new cool coffee shops. They're popping up everywhere, and definitely worth checking it out. So yeah, just hit me up when you're in Austria.
Consider me on my way. I can't wait.
All right, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time talking with us here, or with me in this case. Thank you. It was super exciting. Also for me, it's always interesting to hear stories from people that are on the producing end of the coffee. It's just a little different insight and experience, of course, if you know how much work goes into producing coffee.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And enjoy that coffee. Enjoy that coffee. Every bean counts. That's what we always say with Long Miles. Every bean counts.
Yeah.
And I guess just keep on, like I said, keep looking at the packages when you're going to buy coffee. Don't look for the cheapest. Just look for the package that make sure that they say, where does the coffee come from? Does it come from Honduras, or does it come from Santa Barbara, from Benjamin Paz? You know, who's producing the coffee? It's important.
Thank you. Take care and all the best for your future adventures. If you like our videos and want to learn more about coffee, please support us by hitting the like button and the subscribe button, of course. And also, maybe if you have some ideas for future videos or topics that we could talk about, just put it down in the comments and let us know. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you next time.